down in Abingdon and up as far as Fredericksburg.
Okay. And Amazetta Anderson.
I am Amazetta Anderson. I am on the Safer Communities Committee, and I come with a little background in neighborhood policing from years back. I'm also a member of the Roanoke Neighborhood Advocacy Board and with Fair Housing. My major contribution right now is dealing with crime prevention through good nutrition and education.
Thank you, Amazetta. Rabbi Cohen.
Hi, I am Kathy Cohen. I'm the rabbi at Temple Emmanuel, and I am part of the study committee on the Gun Violence Task Force.
Alice Burlinson.
I'm Alice Burlinson. I'm an attorney with the state. I represent the Division of Child Support Enforcement, which is part of social services. And this working group was looking at child support obligations for incarcerated folks when they come out of incarceration. And that's what I'm bringing to the table. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. And Sergeant Thompson, welcome.
I'm Sergeant Mike Thompson, Roanoke City Police Department. I am currently in charge of the SRT unit, which is the Strategic Response Team, which is in the Community Response Bureau under the direction of Captain Hartman and Lieutenant Holt. Also work side by side with Officer Josh Johnson, who I'm filling in for. It's my first meeting. Any questions or anything you have that needs to make its way to Josh Johnson, I'll be happy to forward those things to him.
Thank you. Let me let Jamie Starkey in the room and we'll get her introduced. Hi, Jamie, welcome.
Hi.
We're just doing introductions, so if you could, your timing is perfect. If you could just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us who you represent.
Perfectly late. Sorry about that. I'm Jamie Starkey. I'm with Family Service of Roanoke Valley.
Thank you. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Robert David with the City of Danville. And Robert, I'm going to have you just introduce yourself and tell us about, give us an introduction to how your position came to be in Danville and the work that you've been doing over the last couple of years. And then we'll just have some open conversation about that.
Okay. Again, my name is Robert David, long title, Youth and Gang Violence Prevention Coordinator. They developed that title before I got here. Back in 2007, you guys know Danville was kind of wide open, a lot of shootings and things. And so the city decided to adopt the comprehensive gang model, which is a evidence-based model from Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And what that model entails is it's a three-pronged model. It's suppression, which has to do with law enforcement, because there's a percentage of people who need to go to jail, the murderers and things like that, and also community watch groups and things like that. Then you have prevention, which is like the GREAT program, and if you remember McGruff the Crime Dog, that kind of stuff. Prevention, don't join gangs, which is more, people do it differently, but from my experiences, that would have to be more effective pre-teen. And then you have intervention. Intervention is when you're going in and intervening into someone who's already in the game. And so I came in 2018. The positive thing is that Chief Booth came in 2018, a few months prior, and he has the same vision. And so the city was ready. They went and got some training, came in. And so when I came in, one of the things that I knew that the city struggled with was economically, a lot of these areas were struggling, the families were struggling. And so I had to look at something that was going to, now I kind of coined the phrase, it was a Tylenol to COVID. By no means are we finished, but at least it helped some of the problems that were going on that we were dealing with. Now, and I'll tell you this, and this is the honest truth, everything that has been done in my program was with $0. I had no budget. I use existing resources, and if you're going to create a gang program, you're going to have to use existing resources, because no one in this Zoom today, or probably no one that you associate regularly, has the ability or the credentials to go on the street and contact these gang members. It doesn't matter how many shirts you give, how many jumpy houses, how many hot dogs. Normally when you do that, you're not really contacting the gang members, you're just contacting some kids, or they make, it's not really effective. So this is a tiered process. And the most powerful thing that I brought to the city was I brought trust. I'm not law enforcement. I work up under the city manager. Now the model calls for a lot of different ways. In some cities, I think in Florida, they have it under another agency. Some cities have it under law enforcement, but I think best practices, consider the environment that we're in right now, if you're going to create a position like this, would not to put it under law enforcement. They have to be, that person has to be able to go out in the community and talk to individuals just generally and make those contacts. The first day I was at work, I was in the community because when you're dealing with this population, I know you guys, if you've dealt with them, one of the things you've heard is, I want my respect, right? They want respect. Respect that we think is respect is not the respect that they're talking about. Their respect is that they want to be humanized. And many times with the programs that we do that are kind of antiquated 1980s kind of stuff, they're not dealing with this generation and they seem somewhat dehumanizing. And so that's why you don't really get a lot of response from these guys. And plus, they're already embedded. That's a whole nother story in that gang lifestyle. So you got to go in with a program that's going to build trust. And you guys can't necessarily do that off the top. You have to go to another level. The grassroots individuals, because just like everywhere else in the city, if you guys think right now, there are individuals who are already doing the work for free, right? They're already working with these young people. They're already trying to fight. Well, if you're going to change the city, you have to connect all those individuals. And that's a process of getting out in the community. That's a process of being transparent, process of being honest about who you are and what you're doing. So we did that, and I created Project Imagine with no money. If you guys are familiar with the WIA program in Danville had been sending hundreds of thousands of dollars back for years. Matter of fact, their budget had been cut because they couldn't meet the population. Well, I knew the population needed money. So I had the money, I had the population, but there was no connection. So I went to the people who had the connections. You guys have CSA mentors. I'm connected relationships with CSA mentors, probation officers. I said, look, give me your gang members. And then I would whether go to their home or I call them in or whatever the case may be, meet them through the mentors, not cold calls at all. Meet them through the mentors or through the probation department. And then I was going to Walmart. And I know it sounds kind of silly, but it's the truth. I would go to Walmart and I would meet random people. I hand them my card. Hey, this is who I am. Because I also had to become human, because in a city, many times they get used to individuals being placed in positions for name only. And you have to break that stigma. So anyway, we made that connection, and that's how the first Project Imagine got started, with no money. And then I had to pitch it to the city and say, hey, look, can you guys provide some jobs if I get these gang members? And like most people, they don't know who gang members are, and I had to do a presentation for these kids, as though they're not, and explain to them that they're like, how do you treat them? Well, you treat them like you treat anyone else, with respect. And so the first group, we had 5 funded by workforce, and my numbers were limited by workforce because they only had a certain amount of budget. It went up a little bit this year. So we started with 5, and out of that 5, I think we had all 5 complete. But and that's a whole nother, I can go on forever. It's a whole training, but that's kind of how I got started. Project Imagine was started with no money and basically fostering relationships in the community. And it's a process. And the way that spills over into law enforcement, Sergeant Thompson, is that once you make these relationships with the CSA who are with them on a regular basis, the mentors, and you make relationships with the mentors, and these guys have general conversation, then there's information. And then we initially started Intel Group, but now it's the safety team, where every month we make probation. Everybody's involved with that youth. The CSA, probation, parole, law enforcement, we come together at a table, not to lock this kid up, but talk about, when's the last time you seen him? Well, I heard he was hanging out with this kid. Oh yeah? And so we put pieces together. Law enforcement will attest that it's also increased their rate of solving cases. So it's really a holistic process. This is one piece, but If you really do it right, you're all working together. And is it going to stop gangs? No, but what you do have is a system to catch the ones who want to be caught. And if you have a system in place, no matter what happens, at least, if you have a structure, no matter what happens, at least you can address it, as opposed to everybody running around trying to figure out what to do. I know I'm making it sound simple, it's not, but it's a process that can start without a lot of overhead. You guys are a bigger city, of course you may need some money for some other things, but you guys have WIA, you've got mentors, you've got probation parole, you just need somebody who has a passion. And this is not, what I do is not a part-time job. This is not someone that you could pull from another agency and say, okay, this is what you do. This position is you gotta eat, live, and sleep this. Because once you get going, you're gonna get those 10 o'clock in the morning phone calls, 5 o'clock in the morning from whoever. You're gonna have to work more than, after 5, 6 o'clock, you're gonna have to dig in. And it has to be somebody that has a desire to really change. So that's kind of the gist. Any questions, because I can talk all day. I love this. And this is my passion. Just a little background. I was doing this stuff free before I ever came to Danville. So it's not like I came here and found some magic book. This has been my life for the last 25 years. So,
Robert, you talked about the comprehensive, I think you call it the comprehensive gang model?
Right, correct.
And where could that be found? Now, you said the city, Danville adopted this model. Is this a national model? Evidence
national model.
Okay.
Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And we stayed in contact. Actually, we had a training. We had them come down and do a training for all the city officials in February, because everyone in the city has to be on board with this thing, because it's not like one entity. And that's another mistake that many cities make, is that they assign one entity to try to stop a gang problem. And that's not possible.
Okay.
So that the comprehensive is essentially everybody in the city. And the key is just finding how to place different agencies in their position so they can be effective, because not everyone is going to be on the street.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the 3 components, and I caught prevention and intervention. What was the first?
Suppression.
Suppression. Okay.
That's law enforcement. That's just going to get them. That's one of the big things that happened in Danville 2018, right as I got here, was that the federal government came in and they took all the killers out. My terminology is a difference between a killer and a shooter. That's just me.
Okay.
A killer is someone, a lot of kids will shoot, but not all of them are killers. Mm-hmm. And so they came and got like 20 of the top gang members in our city, and they got them out of the community, and then they did some RICO stuff, and they got a lot of other kind of people connected to them, and that shocked the city, because up until that point, nothing had really been done about gangs. They would, the law enforcement would get you for murder, but nothing had really been done about gangs. And so it shocked the city. And then when Chief and I began to do what we did, it really had a huge impact.
Tell us a little bit more about some of the components of Project Imagine.
Well, Project Imagine is kind of a workforce readiness program. So again, I know they needed money. And WIA already has some preset stuff in it, where they'll do training. They have to take a career scope. They have to do a GED testing to see where they are educationally. And it depends on the individual that's working in WIA and how much money they have, but they will do some additional workforce training. And so what they had in place was that it was 16 to 24 years old, or 15 to 24, that they would pay them $10 an hour tax-free. It didn't impact the benefits of the parent. So that was attractive. So they could get SNAP and Section 8 and all that. And so they had that money there, and we just connected them. We connected them with that population. The key here is not just working, because it's not just money. Money was kind of the bait, but what we really wanted to do was foster the relationship, because up until this point, there was no relationship with those individuals in the street besides law enforcement. No relationship on this level. Of course, there were individuals in the community that knew them, But at that time, the community wasn't talking because they were afraid. So by setting these young men up with jobs, not only did you have an opportunity to talk to them and to humanize yourself and see that, okay, we really do care, and then set some minor goals like just finish the program. As far as working every day, did those guys? No. Some of them would work once a week, 3 times, but that wasn't the key. The key was to maintain that contact, to have that access, to have that cell phone number, to be able to refer them to other things, such as in a couple of situations, refer them to Job Corps, refer them to DCC welding program, those kind of things. So when you're creating this program, don't be so focused on the quantitative data. You have to look more of the relationship. Will this young man reach back? Do I have access to these individuals after all this is over? Do they feel comfortable enough to talk to me? And that was really the main thing about Project Imagine. You know, give them an image that they could do better, but also I would do simple things like, of course, COVID kind of changed a little bit, but my groups normally, I bring these guys into City Hall, in the municipal building, and some of them had never been here before in their life. So I would bring them in, and we have an orientation before, and I bring in the banks, and I bring in a job opportunity. I bring in some guys on the street who've had some struggles, and then I take them up to HR, and we get them a badge. That alone shifts how they think. So the small things of what we take for granted to develop that relationship has a major impact. And I mean, you know, and people are going to be people, and they're going to do what they're going to do, but they still remember you, and they still remember that if there's anyone I could call, if I ever needed to change my life or desire, I knew I could call Mr. David. And that's kind of what happens. You know, I have a guy from my first class that reach out. So it's just a relationship.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the focus on relationship, because I think, you know, that, you know, in the long term, that's really what's going to transform the situation. You talked about how critical it is for you, for this person to be someone who has the street credibility, who kind of, there's this immediate sense of trust. And we have a number of people in the community who, as you said, are already volunteering their time to do some of this work. And how do you go about, well, and let me set a little context for this. We're working with the police department to, in the city services and rapid response effort, to create a rapid response team. And they're hiring a mitigation coordinator who will then train a team of volunteers who will essentially be able to be on site or provide immediate wraparound services for people impacted by trauma, including gun violence. Knowing that that's happening, it makes me wonder about a Project Imagine team. Are you, in addition to the work you're doing, how are you going about working with or training community members to be a part of this effort?
Well, initially, I would go speak to different agencies, and I would just tell them where they fit. I would show them the model, and I would say, okay, this is where you are, and this is how you can contribute. For example, DSS, you know, with food stamps and things like that, that you're not going to be on the front line, but you can be a referral agency. So when I get a kid in, even though, because I still deal with kids, even if they don't go through the work program, I still bring them in, and I bring their parents in, and I bring them into the municipal building so they can see that we are real people. And I say, okay, well, you know, the work program's not here, but what do you need? How can I help you? And sometimes like, well, you know, I just lost my stamps because I didn't reply. Well, let me make a phone call, and I'll call them there, because I use the authority that I have in order to let them see that there's someone here that really does care. Because you have to understand there's a history with government and these individuals. There's a lot of trust that has to be cultivated, has to be broken up, and it's not going to be done all at once. But whoever you have in that position, they have to be genuine. and they're gonna have to, it can't be done from the office. And if they are law enforcement, it can't be done with a uniform, especially not in this environment. It has to be an individual who really has a passion and almost a social work kind of person, but with a lot of different, a lot of different skills, because you have to speak a lot of different languages. You have to be able to go out in the community and speak that language and empathize with the individuals and what they're going through, and bring that information back to the municipalities and express this is what's going on in the community, or this is what they're really upset about. Because many times as municipalities, we create the solution without ever knowing the problem. We assume this is the problem, but we really don't know. So I would do that groundwork of making relationship with the people who already have relationships. And that's how I did it. Going out there cold calling, people are standoffish. We don't trust you, we don't know you. So you got to cultivate those relationships with those individuals who are already doing the work. And then sometimes it's a matter of, if they have an event, you're not even saying anything, just go there and stand. They introduce you, this is Mr. Whoever, and you never say another word. I mean, it's a problem. Like I said, the first day I was on the job, I was in the street every day for the first month. There's no exaggeration. I was somewhere riding around, dropping in barbershops, going on if I saw some guys hanging out on the corner. I mean, my background's a little different, of course. I got 25 years of public safety. I was a probation officer. I worked with gangs in California. I worked in mental health. So I got a little different background. But what I'm saying is, you got to be willing to get out there and make yourself human before they're going to say, okay, maybe this person does really care.
I'm going to stop asking questions for a little bit and see who else here might have some questions they'd like to ask. You can just unmute and ask. That'd be fine.
Well, I have a question as to, in relevance to, when you go out into the community and you build these relationships, out of the persons that you're already working with, how many of them, outside of any requirement, have actually stepped up and asked you to help them start something, on an activity or a group? How many of them have reached out to say, hey, help us do this? We want to be a part of rebuilding our community. We want to rebuild our trust with the municipalities. So, in just maybe a percentage of, how's it going in that aspect?
It's hard to give a percentage, but I can say it's because I don't know many out there. But the ones that, when I do go out, I would say from the ones I've contacted, I would say at least 80%, because they really do want their community to change. They just don't know how. And resources are always going to be an issue. And so the key is being able to have those individuals connected, but allowing them to keep that anonymity. Because another fear is anybody who's doing that work doesn't want to be consumed by the city, because then it restricts what they do. So being able to structure that.
Okay,
For
thank you.
example, we have a program called Hoop Don't Shoot. You guys might have heard about that. And it's just a lady, Miss Angie, she went out there 3 years ago on a basketball court and said, look, stop killing each other. Let's hoop, don't shoot. And that's her ministry. It's church-based. Matter of fact, they just baptized some people out on the basketball court a couple of weeks ago. Now, she wants to maintain anonymity, but we do work with her we collaborated with the Salvation Army, who had a facility, and then we collaborated with Faith-Based Tutorial, which is a tutorial program that sets up all over the city in churches. And we developed a program right before COVID where they could come in the afternoon. Part of the requirement was that you had to do some type of tutorial program in order to come and shoot again. So that's the kind of things that you have to be able to be creative. Many of the programs that you go back and look, especially if you're looking at bigger cities, LA, they're not applicable to Roanoke. Roanoke is kind of like Danville. I would imagine, and after talking to some of the officers, the gangs are not totally blood, not totally Crip, because you got cousins and things. Is that kind of it, Sergeant Thompson? Or are they just...
Actually, you're right. Some of them are Bloods than their other brothers and sisters or Crips.
Yeah.
They're not solely, you know, just my name example. The Thompson family are related with the Bloods. And I've talked to many out on the street. I said, you know, if someone from LA or something like that where it originated, they wouldn't allow this. You know, they don't allow the cross. You can't say I'm a Blood one day and then the next day you say you're a Crip. It doesn't work that way. And that's a lot of what we have here.
And that's what was in Danville. And because it's kind of unique to this area. And my motto, one of the things I say is, you know, red and blue make green.
Uh-huh.
Because they will work with anybody who's going to produce some money. That's why Project Imagine was so tantalizing, because it gave them opportunity to make some money, and you can make that relationship, even though they didn't take advantage of it. It still was, and then it's an intervention tool, because when you're doing intervention, and I know sometimes when you hear these programs, they're synonymous, those intervention, prevention, but they're not. They're two separate things. And when you're intervening, that means that you're going into and you're giving them something in exchange for what they already have. That's what intervention really means. So when you're creating these programs, you have to create them in the mindset of, is this valuable enough for them to exchange for the game? And we're unique in that way down here.
Well, do you have, and this is to both of you, is I'm thinking, you know, most of the activity, it comes out of any violence, when it results in a violent act, is usually because of the fact that we don't really have people out there promoting intervention in the way of conflict resolution, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Some of your volunteers qualified to intervene with this. Do you all have a group that will deal with youth conflict resolution?
Here in Danville?
Yes.
We use the mentors.
Okay.
And myself. So if something happens and law enforcement knows about it, then they'll call me, hey, like, you know, such been shooting over here again. Now, if I've got that relationship, I'll shoot them a text. Not necessarily about that. I'll be like, hey, what's up, man? What's going on? Give me a call. And then we'll just kind of call, we'll kind of talk. And he may not tell me the truth, but it gives me an opportunity just to talk. One example which rings out really clear from last year is that we had a young man in the program, and I kind of developed a relationship. He had a baby on the way. He was a big homie, or he was a leader. We got young leaders here in Danville. They're not old school. The stuff you see in LA, and that's the difference. Like in other places, those OGs, the older guys might or might not still have respect. But here in the Southwest, we got guys 17, 18 calling themselves OGs. But anyway, he was a leader. And he was in the program, making money, doing well. And he ends up getting shot over the weekend. He got shot in the neck, kind of scared me. So when I heard he got shot, they released him. I went to his house the next day and talked to him. His mother's cussing me out because she's all strung out. And we was talking in the middle of the street, and he's like, nah, I'm good. I said, look, man, you got you got a baby on the way, all that kind of stuff. Now, law enforcement was monitoring the social media activity after the shooting. Let's say from that whole day, and it was talking about retaliation. After I go out and I talk to the young man, because of the relationship, the activity stopped and there was never any retaliation. That's what relationships do. Now for you guys, the other part of the comprehensive gang model is outreach workers. I didn't have any money, so I had to create my own outreach workers by working with the mentor. I don't advise that for you guys because fortunately I had a mentor who was ex-deputy sheriff of Winston-Salem, and I knew him because we'd done a lot of gang stuff previously in North Carolina. He was up here, so I knew I could trust him, and we were able to navigate the system, and we do a great job with that. But you guys need outreach workers. And outreach workers are those individuals similar to those individuals who are already in the community. They might have felonies themselves. They might be ex-gang members, but they want to help in the community. You need people like that to do the conflict resolution, to be mentors to those individuals. And those individuals are supervised by people, maybe the mitigation guy, which again, recommend being law enforcement or someone in you guys' position, kind of middle level management. Because outreach workers speak a different language. And they're not really concerned about meeting too much. They want to be out in the community and they want to see impact. And they really don't care what process you guys have to go through to make that impact. They just want impact. So that's what's in the model as well.
Kathy?
Have you, first of all, thank you so much for being here, Mr. David. This is really helpful. Have you used any, or have you been successful with any prevention techniques with middle school age children?
Now that's the gap. That's the gap. See, law enforcement here they're doing community engagement, going into the school. They go to the housing authorities and places. So law enforcement has that taken care of. It's great. And so that's catching elementary on back. Middle school is the next big population for us. And so prior to COVID, because it's just me, I created a program, a kind of a self-efficacy program to encourage moving forward. So I talked to the middle schools here and I said, okay, I'll come in and do kind of bell ringers early in the morning and talk about, and actually I have a book called Stand Up and Breathe, and it's about how to recover from failure. And so I was going to use that, how to go from where you are now to where you want to be. And I was going to use it as a model for these middle schoolers to try to catch them before they get in the street, because right now they're recruiting here because of everything that's happened and because they're kind of in the money-making mode right now. They're recruiting as early as 9 years old here. And so what the plan was to get in the middle school and early in the morning get those group of, I think they call them high flyers, and one that maybe were kind of having some problems, and talk to them about who they are, transparency, and where you're going, and then connecting with resources, developing that relationship. Not so much of preaching, but going in and just being, developing those relationships with different little or the icebreakers and things like that. But the focus is getting them to see, okay, provide some hope. I can do something other than what I'm doing, even if I'm in this environment. So middle school is a tough area because they're not old enough to work, but they're too smart to get caught up in the jumpy houses and the hot dogs that elementary school kid. So with middle school, you probably have to, if you guys have centers where they go, but they probably centers where they go or school, I would try to get to the middle school kids through the school, programs through the school, because they're kind of, they're in that blank area because you can't offer them jobs.
Yeah.
And like I said, they're too sophisticated for the other stuff, but they still need to be addressed. So I would think in order, as they're doing the suppression and everything else, I would focus on make sure you don't miss middle school, because those are the next shooters.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you mentioned that you started out with 5 jobs through workforce readiness. Have you been able to increase that number?
Well, they gave me 7 this time. And it just depends on their budget. I'm sure you guys have a bigger budget, and most WIA programs have the same problem, is that they can't connect with the population, because it is really, it's a kind of, I'm not gonna say a long process, but a tedious process of bringing a lot of paperwork back. And when you're dealing with these marginalized individuals, coming back and forth to appointments is not what they're gonna do. Because you gotta have a social security card, you gotta have a birth certificate, you have to have so much, your SNAP benefits, you have to have 6 months of income. And so you're telling a kid who's, if you can't connect them, you're expecting the mother to do that, or having the kid come back for another appointment, and that's where they were losing them. So my job was to be the connect. That's what I went into WW more, and I would tell the kids, when you get out, look me up. I'm the connect. I'm the plug. So what I would do is work with the mentors and work with the parents and say, okay, what do you have? Give me that. Send me the information, and I'll send it to the WIA to make sure that it's processed, that it doesn't get lost or whatever. Then I work with WLA. Okay, what do they need? Okay, I'll make sure they have that. So just kind of dealing with the barriers. And I mean, and I'm sure you guys have used that in many other aspects of services because I know it's a problem in many other services is that limiting the barriers. And that's what I did. And that's how they were able to get on because normally it's just too much. I mean, do you, other than on the computer, do you have 6 months of check stuff running around?
Right.
So imagine trying to get this population of guys who's out here shooting, want to change, want a job, but they can't use money that's sitting over there. So that's why
one of the problems I've found with money is that, especially for prevention, is it won't bridge the ages. You can find youth money, but that money those programs stop at 18. So my theory is that you have to build relationships with our kids. You start when they're late middle school, early high school. You go with them, and then when they start to age out of high school, they graduate, they still need people. That's a really vulnerable age, and that's when they need people. But the money stops. It won't bridge up. I think now there is a little more ability. I think DCJS understands that that 18 isn't the end of the issue.
Right.
And I think, but I looked into creating a program several years ago that money, the age was the issue. Kids money versus adult money.
Right.
So I think that to find a flexible funding source for us community agencies, now I'm not talking about for city departments, but for community agencies to find a flexible funding source that could bridge the whole gap, the whole age range, was a difficulty back then.
Right. But the WRA covers that age group.
Right.
And that's why, and to your point, that's why outreach workers are so important. Because when they turn 18, they still need that help. And an outreach worker could possibly be working with that kid since he was 16 and continue to work with him until, with an outreach worker, the city sets the standard. You can go as high as 24. I mean, it's up to you. And so and you're absolutely right, bridging that gap, because many times kids are just dropped off.
Right. At a time when all the other structures fall away, schools fall away, a lot of times youth groups, like church youth groups, they fall away. After school centers, community centers, they can't access those structures that held them in the middle of the road.
Right. So
help them.
So it's easier just to go to something that's already structured.
Right.
The game. So
right.
Yeah. So, and that's what, like I said in the beginning, it's so many parts. It's not like one entity. Again, a mistake many cities make all over the country is that we're going to do one program and it's going to take care of everything. And this is a multi-layered, so many layers, and that can easily be done, because here's the great thing about this program is that you guys have every resource in order to do it. It's a matter of getting that structure and talking to the people who can make decisions. In doing this, you're going to have to be able to talk to people who can say yes or no, because those are the ones that are going to make it happen. Because if not, you'll be meeting for the next 2 years trying to get everyone to agree on how it should be done. I have a motto, and it's, get the car running, you can put the rims on later. It doesn't have to be pretty starting off. It has to just move, and that's kind of what we did. And when we started, it wasn't pretty at all. It was just hustle on everybody's part. But now we're starting to get some rims and being able to get some grants, and everybody's coming on board, and everyone's seeing, oh, this really does affect me. I mean, even with faith-based organizations, as I think I gave a disclaimer, is that I live this. So everything that about me thinks about this 24/7. So even with faith-based organizations, I wrote a book called Gangs versus Kingdom, which talks about how to almost gang awareness in the language of churches, because churches speak a different language. And many times they don't really see how they fit in, because if you have an older congregation, they're not going to go out in the street. But if you've developed a relationship, Let's just say that you have an outreach worker who has a relationship with a youth, and then the outreach worker develops a relationship, or the church develops a relationship in their own community. And so the old lady who goes to the church and she's 80, she can't, how is she going to develop a relationship? What she does, she knows how to cook. She can cook a cake. So then the outreach worker takes the cake to the family and to that kid and said, look, Miss Laddie down the street, she cooked this cake for you. She cooked it because she cares. This is how you create relationships. And if he thinks that you care about him, he's less likely to kick your door. Now, it is a process, but that's how you bridge those relationships in order to take back a community. The concept of the book I wrote was called 4 in 1, about developing mentorship through faith-based organizations, taking back the community essentially without any money. Because if you think about the churches in the community, normally within a couple of square blocks, there's 3, 4, 5 churches. And if you could take some members out of that church to dedicate themselves to an individual, to make sure the individual makes it, then you have a mentor program through the church, which very little cost. It just takes some sweat equity. Mm-hmm. Working with law enforcement, working with the prevention in the school, being able to resource those things out, get them the mental health that they need, get them the resources that they need, working with the school. So it's not like one entity.
What other questions do you all have? Well, Robert, I'm just going to ask you, if I'm going to throw out a hypothetical scenario.
Okay.
You're coming to our city to help us, launch this program. What are some, like, the first steps that we need to take? You've kind of outlined these in a variety of ways. But if you were going to advise us on, like, the first steps to take to get the car running, what would those be?
I would meet with all the directors and get everyone on board and explain exactly what you're doing to decrease the resistance, because it has to start from the top. If everyone from city councilman on down, if they're not on board, then it's going to be a stall out. That would be the first thing. And it goes to probation, all the directors. This is what we're doing. I wouldn't ask it as a question. I would say, this is what we're doing, and this is how we need to do it. If you're interested in doing the comprehensive gang model, you go to National Gang Center and request them come in to train. Or I don't know if they're doing it now because of COVID, but and after you get everybody on board, if you already hired that mitigation off, you need to find out what are the real issues in your city, and determine what area you're going to attack. I know from doing a little research, I think it was Northwest is having most of the shootings. Well, you need to look at the resources you have in that area. What are the resources in Northwest, and how they benefiting those individuals over there? What are the barriers over the Northwestern area that are stopping individuals from getting resources? If it's jobs, then you need to look at jobs. If it's other services, most of the time it's just an array of things. So look at that and then begin to solve those problems as you create the program. If you let me share my screen.
Yeah, hold on a second.
Got a second. I'm going to show you something on how to, this is basically how gangs operate. Now, again, I eat, sleep, and live this, so you're not going to find this anywhere else. But I just feel the need to share this so you kind of understand. We're all familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So when you're creating a program, if what you're creating can't match what the gang provides, you guys see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
What you're creating, if it can't match what the gang provides, then you're not creating an effective program. Our thinking is, as cognitive functioning human beings, we believe, Maslow's motivational theory, that once you achieve physiological things, bread and food, then you'll strive. That's his theory. Well, when they join a gang, they don't follow that theory, because a gang gives me all my physiological needs. We're always looking for why do they join gangs. There's no one reason. Gangs create a structure that mimics Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If I join a gang, I have safety and security, even though it may not be to our perception of what we perceive as safety and security, but to them it's safety and security. I have self-esteem. Now we think self-esteem, if you remember working that first job and you getting your first check, how did you feel? You felt like a man or a woman, you felt strong, your parents can't tell you anything anymore, right? But when they join the gang, that's why we see those behaviors, because they have a level of self-esteem. That's what all the gang signs and all this stuff is about. Is I want you to know who I am and where I'm from. Love and belonging, right?
That's right.
They have that. There's no need to strive for those things, because once I join a gang, I have everything I need in their mind. Now, whether or not we think it's true, doesn't matter. It's what they believe. And self-actualization, which is at the top of the theory, creativity, problem solving, lack of judgment. We have to strive for that. When they join the gang, they don't need to be creativity. Their creativity is entrenched in what the gang does. So when you're creating a program, you have to remember that, or you're creating a program that is just hitting one area. And many programs are created to hit one area. Project Imagine was created, of course, or the lure was money, but I was trying to mimic this. But now, one agency or one program can't mimic that. That's why it's important for everybody in this room to find their place. That would be my next thing. Once you talk to those individuals and they buy into it, then I would begin to look at those things and how do we create a program that is going to mimic what the gangs are already gives them. And most of that is going to be done, or the majority of that is going to be done through relationship, because you can't get to the gang without the relationship. And you guys may not be able to get to them, but again, if you cultivate relationships with those individuals who are already doing the work, then if they see you enough and there's a little bit of trust, maybe you can have a conversation. Hey, this is what I got. Go out on the street. I got these jobs, man. $10 an hour, tax-free. Ain't gonna mess with your mama SNAP. Ain't gonna mess with your mama housing. Come holler at me. And they may come up. And once they get in the program, are they gonna stop doing what they're doing? Of course not, because it's a conversion. But at least you have that relationship, and they may have a sense of, maybe I don't want to be in this gang. You know what I mean? It's a process. You have to look at gangs as which gangs are a religion in the same way that someone would convert from one religion to another. That's how gangs convert. The real hardcore, there's a lot of them that's on the bubble. Some people call them wannabes, but I've never seen a wannabe bullet. So they're on the bubble where they're in the gang, but they would like to get out. So a program will help them. If they're already hardcore, they're married to that. And that's where law enforcement comes in, and they have to do the suppression. So that's why it all works together, because you don't know who's who. You can't just tell by tattoos or what they do, you can't tell by that. So that would be my next thing, is develop something doing that. And then, as you're developing that, get the right people, like you said, the mitigation officer, and spell out what's his purpose based on the program. Not based on what we think, but based on the program that you're creating. Because if that mitigation officer has a underlying connection specifically to law enforcement, then he's going to do law enforcement kind of things, which is going to be counterproductive to the program. So I can talk all day, man. But
This is great, and my I feel pretty certain we'll have you back, maybe for the full committee, to share some of these steps. But any other questions from anybody on the call this morning? You've given us a lot to consider, and I really appreciate the focus, because I think we're all dedicated to starting somewhere, but we want to, as best we can, start in the right way, which is with the relationship focus.
Right, because that's what's sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
I do have one question, Mr. David, if I may. That PowerPoint, is that something possible that I could look at the whole thing? You could share with me, or not as a go by, but just kind of. I see you got a lot of buy-in, and I can tell by why a lot of these individuals are drawn to you, because I can tell by talking to everyone here, some of the language that they are used to out on the streets you're using. So I can see what you're saying as far as the buy-in.
Yeah.
Because if I go and I say, hey, according to this code section, I just lost it.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying as far as you have to adapt to them and humanize yourself. I think that's probably, this is just my opinion, an issue we have here is our police department is a bunch of young officers that don't have a lot of life experience. They have college experience. They have to get people skills. And I think that's the point you're trying to drive across is the culture on the street is one thing. The college culture is another. And our younger officers have to learn their culture and everything to humanize themselves.
Yeah.
If I'm going down the right path here.
You're totally right. I got to slide on that. I'll come and do the presentation. I don't want to hand this out because I'm building something. But you're right. And I call it the 3 C's. You gotta cultivate the relationship, you have to communicate, and then you have to understand the culture. We all do that one way or another. And everywhere we go, we communicate a certain way, we cultivate a relationship, and then we understand the culture and we respect it. But that's what I mean by humanizing. We talking to these young men like, or talking about them sometimes, and the point of units or items as opposed to humans. And they feel that when you do these programs and you want them to come. And you have to humanize yourself and say, okay, I got to understand your culture. I don't have to believe in it because there's a lot of things we don't believe in. There's a lot of cultures we don't believe in, but we respect. And you have to use those same skills in dealing with these individuals because not everybody is a killer. Not every kid that's in the gang, they might be breaking and entering and all that kind of stuff, but not everybody's a hardcore killer, and those are the ones you want to try to pull back. You let law enforcement deal with, I think OJJDP said it's about 2% who are truly gang members, killers that need to go to prison. And then the rest of them, you got to deal with these individuals and their families, and that's another aspect. You got to deal with the family, be able to communicate with the families in a way to assist them, not perpetuate a welfare mentality where you continually give them things, but empower these individuals to believe that they could do something more. And like I said, Project Imagine, the name, Imagine the city of Danville, his motto was reimagine that. And so I said, how can you imagine something that you never had an image of? And so Project Imagine was to give you this image of what you could be. Whether or not you follow that image, it might be 15 years from now. And as I said, we've had great success. We got a group right now, and this will be our 4th cohort. Again, still running with no money.
Now, can you talk a little bit more about the cohort? Is this the Project Imagine cohort?
Yeah, this is the 4th one we're doing. We're in the middle of it right now. And so we were supposed to start in April because I try to do 2 a year because of funding and just coordinating. But because of COVID, we had to linger. So we ended up with 7 this time, and one quit. He didn't want to work. So just because you give him a job doesn't mean they're going to work.
Right.
But he knows my name. I know his name. I see him on the street. We got that somewhat of a connection. Okay. The other 6, 2 of them, 2 of them got some problems right now. But even though law enforcement is looking for him, he called me yesterday, texted me yesterday. So the relationship is there. And whoever you got in this position, you know, they have to be kind of savvy because these young guys will set you up. They'll tell you something and then see if it comes back out on the street. So you really, I tell you what, you guys need us to come up and just do a training. This is like an all-day thing to really get this. But so we got these 6, and so we got 1 working. And so what happened after the first cohort, we were able to engage local businesses. So now I have 1 working at the car wash, and I had the other 2. And this guy was a convicted felon, spent 7, 8 years, one of the biggest drug dealers in this area, cleaned his life up, which is a great mentor. And now I allowed those kids to work over at the car wash. We've got one working at Public Works, Housing Authority, and one working in the library. And so the way you place them is without the relationship, you have to go on the conversation of the parent, the conversation of the mentor, whoever knows them, the probation officer, and your gut to be able to try to place them in a place where they're going to be successful. And sometimes it may not be a good fit. And so you have to have that flexibility to shift them. Like I've had to move someone from the library to Public Works. It was just a better fit. That's why everyone in the city has to be on board and say, okay, can you allocate me a couple of slots for Public Works? At the first cohort, I think I had a kid working in the Welcome Center. And you're thinking they're gangsters and you see them, but then they show up for work and they got on khaki pants, a polo shirt, pants tucked in, built because they want to do better. I walked in the library and I'm like, man, I didn't know who you were. You got your dreads tightened up, you know what I mean? Polo shirt on, belt, looking great, speaking the way you should speak, doing a great job. This particular kid is 19, started begging when he was 13. They did an article on him. He wanted to get out. Now he's staying with his girlfriend looking for a job. Didn't know how because of his charges and all that kind of stuff. Goes to the library. He doesn't read that well. So, and this is what I mean by people buying in. The director of library said, hey, you know, so what do you like? I paint shoes. So next week, they've set up a program for him to paint shoes in the public library, a free program, empowering his strength as opposed to demeaning the fact that he can't read that well. And so now we're going to make it available. Well, it's available to everybody because it's free. But then we have some agency leaders come over, have some other mentors bring some of their kids. Those are that qualitative data that you can't necessarily see on paper, but those are the kind of things that change the city. And those are the kind of things that foster relationships. And they tell other kids, you know, because I know I look like law enforcement. And so a kid would say something, or a young man, and another guy say, nah, Mr. David, all right, man. That's how you change the city incrementally. Now, will you still have shooting? Probably. But as I said, at least you have a structure. Because banging is going to be banging. You're not going to stop that. But you have a structure and you'll catch the ones who would have been lost. At least you'll catch some of them and stop some shootings, you know? So.
Well, we will follow up with you after this on the possibility of bringing you one way or the other to do a training. Okay.
I'll be more than happy. Like I said, I love this. You guys are making my day. I get to talk about it. No one wants to hear about it. I get to talk about what I love the most. But I'm glad you guys reached out. And I think Roanoke is just a bigger version of Danville. The mentality is kind of the same. And a lot of the gangsters from down here ran up there because Danville, as they say, y'all doing too much. So if you're going to see an influx, and wherever there's a least resistance is where they're going to go. And when the chief came down, I think one of the officers said about there was a connection in Danville running drugs to Roanoke. So I mean, it's kind of the same. It's just y'all bigger version, and you know, focus on Northwest and see how it goes. It's better than waiting for them to stop.
Anybody else have any other questions right now? Well, thank you all for being here. I did record this today so that we can save it and have some of your insights, and so that others who couldn't be here today can take a look at it. So thank you again, Robert, for your time today. Thank you all for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to following up with you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Nice meeting everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you. It was good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.